Welcome to my car and to my office, everyone. And today I'm going to talk about getting reliable power out of the S63TU and the F10 M5 platform. Now I know that sounds like blasphemy. Reliable power from an S63 and a V8 BMW? How? No way. But rest assured, today I'm going to educate you on just how to get reliable power from this platform. So let's talk about making reliable power on the S63TU first generation platform. So before you start talking about making reliable power, you need to know the limits and where the car lacks and what you need to make up for. So in the case of the first gen S63TU, the fueling is the limiting factor on making big power on these engines, specifically the fueling pressure. So with the high pressure fuel pump on the F10 M5 and the S63TU of this generation, the high pressure fuel pump outputs about 200 bar of pressure. So in comparison to the new F90 M5, which outputs 350 bar of pressure, so 150 bar more of pressure. And that's why on the F90 M5, you can actually run full E85 off the stock fuel pumps. And on this generation of the S63TU, you cannot run full 85. You can run probably E30 or E40 max. I've run E30 with success, but you can get crashing. A lot of people say that your fuel pump's duty cycle crashes at that fuel flow, but it just depends on your car and your fuel pump situation. So your next question might be, well, why don't I just upgrade my fuel pump to the spool performance fuel pump, which outputs 250 bar pressure? That is a good upgrade that a lot of people tend to do on this generation of S63. However, when you do that, your stock injectors are still your bottleneck at that point because they only output 200 bar of pressure, or between 200 and 250 bar of pressure. So you're still bottlenecked there, even if you do upgrade your high pressure pumps. So then you say, okay, let me upgrade my injectors, which there are upgrades for these cars, up to 1,000 horsepower injectors, rated injectors. So at that point, you could do that, but then you're gonna need to upgrade your low pressure pump. Okay, how do I upgrade the low pressure pump? You can probably get a spool performance stage 3 pump. You can rebuild your factory one. There's a lot of things, there's a lot of options that you have. If you do use a factory one at that kind of power level, they typically don't last for long. So ideally you want an upgraded pump that will be more robust. So all that just stresses that fueling pressure is the limiting factor on this particular version of the S63 BMW engine. Now let's talk about engine internals, which is another limiting factor to making power on these cars and something that you need to be cognizant of if you're going to make reliable power. So these cars, these engines will bend rods in stock power. So you can actually bend your connecting rod, which is pretty crazy. Typically that's due to bad tuning and a dyno graph that is too abrupt in its torque curve at too low RPM with too much load on the engine, and you can actually bend a rod. So if you're gonna make really reliable power, you actually probably want to open up the engine and replace the rods and the pistons with forged versions. You don't have to, because there's plenty of engines running out there with no bent rods, tuned engines with no bent rods running up to 800 horsepower that have never had any issue. And my car is one of those cars. However, you could be on borrowed time depending on the situation of on how your car's making power. So unless you have $30,000 to spare for a new S63 engine, I would advise building the engine or running safer power levels. But I won't say like I would say to tune your car. Like I would never tell anyone not to tune their car in this case, because if they're bending rods at stock power levels, you're not really safe there either. So those were just anomalies, you know? So I think that you're safe tuning this engine and pushing it, you know, to 20-30% more power than it has from factory without actually grenading it from the inside out. Next, so to make really reliable power, you need supplemental fuel. So the best way to do that is either to run race gas all the time, or upgrade your fuel system using Spool Performance or some other manufacturer. That's the other thing, there's not too many manufacturers of aftermarket fuel components for this generation of S63 engine. So if you're planning on making big power, reliable power, you either need to run race gas all the time, you need to add a methanol kit, or you need to upgrade your fuel system to run full E85. So those are really your options for making reliable big power on these engines. Notice I didn't mention slapping a big turbo on, because at that point you definitely should build the engine, because even with stock turbos you can grenade the engine, the pistons, the rods. You can grenade the whole engine even at stock power. So I would advise have fun with your car, tune it, but make sure you get a good tune. Make sure you use the right fuel for your tune. Make sure that if you're trying to make big power, you're using race gas. Make sure that your fuel system can support what you're doing. And most of all, your clutch is the most important thing in this equation, because you can do all those mods and get all this power from your car, but if it can't hold the power, then it's pretty much useless to you. That's why I'm not running E30 right now in this car, because when I was previously, the clutch started to slip, and so I'm going to replace it. But in the meantime, I'm running the Stage 2 91 octane, which is still a huge power, but the E30 tune is way more raucous. And I actually do plan on adding a JB4 at some point to push the car a little bit more. But at that point, again, you really are approaching needing to build the engine and open it up. So let's talk about Stage 1 power levels. So at Stage 1 power levels, if you want to make reliable power, you really just need a good tune, I would say. You don't need additional engine cooling at this point, because there's plenty of headroom in the cooling system on these cars. You need to consider upgrading your clutch, possibly. Some people report slipping at these power levels, 630 or 640 wheel torque, give or take. But a lot of people don't have slipping at these power levels. That's typically once you get to Stage 2 and beyond. So at Stage 1 power levels, you just need a good tune, one with a torque curve that's not too aggressive, so that you're not risking your rods and your engine. So I talked about Stage 1 power. Now let me talk about Stage 2 power levels. So at Stage 2 power levels, you're approaching 680, in some cases 690 wheel torque, depending on how strong your tune is and the fuel that you're running. So in those cases, you're really pushing the driveline of your car. Your clutches are probably on their way out if they're not already slipping. Your axles are probably screaming if you're launching your car a lot, and your rods could be struggling inside your engine if your tune is too aggressive and your dyno graph looks like a very steep torque curve. So all in all, how do you make reliable power on the S63TU platform? So really what you need is a good tune, one that is not too aggressive in its torque curve too early on in the RPM range, because when you're doing that and when you tune it that way, you're actually risking your entire engine, obviously, because your rods could bend, they could snap, break, and throw a rod through the block, grenading your entire engine. So I'm going to be very careful with it, and I advise you to do the same. So I hope you learned something today, and that's how you make reliable power on this platform. Again, this is the S63TU engine. You can find this engine in cars from 2011 all the way up to now to 2024 actually. And right now we're at the 4th generation of S63, which is in the F90 M5, and the X5M, and a few other cars. So I hope you guys learned something. Thanks for watching.